And without those revenues, they are unable to keep their journalists on staff. And as newsrooms diminish, as they grow weaker in strength, then there will be less journalism. And with less journalism, our democracy will be at risk. And I think that's a major issue, not just for journalists, not just for the media generally, for the Kenyan public, but for the Kenyan public at large. Second bit of that is that we as journalists consider ourselves as professionals. We are confronted with a much different landscape, much different problem to deal with. So there has of necessity to be a professional reset. And we must have conversations on how exactly this reset should happen. How differently should we run journalism so that we deliver stories effectively, timely, and speak to the interests that make our people improve their lives. And then finally, on that bit, is the whole question of media trust. Everything goes if the public, if the audiences that we serve don't trust in what we do. So we have to find ways to pay a lot more attention to these audiences if we are to make media sustainable, because a performing media is not just one for journalists, it is one for society. But to enable all those three, we think that redefining the landscape is critical, yeah, because it's only when we redefine the media landscape that a fresh sustainability model can be brought about. And for that, there are four main areas for us as a guild that we think the family should think about. One is the whole question of how can journalism that is paid for from public offers be made and structured in such a way that there is editorial independence. And when I speak to that, I'm reminded of a constitutional requirement for a national broadcaster. I think we must talk about how to enable our national broadcaster to deliver for the citizen, regardless of who is in power day to day. And the second bit of that is the whole question of how do we use public policy, how do we use the law, and how do we use public resources to ensure that there is media diversity. Because without media diversity, we run the risk of having a single opinion crowding every other shade of idea. I don't think that would be right. The second bit of redefining this landscape is that as the current business models fail, many of our media houses will run towards new zones, for example, subscriptions. But we must, of essence, ask ourselves, what are the implications of this for reader to democracy? What happens when the best information is put behind paywalls? What happens to the fellow who is unable to afford that paywall? I think as a profession, as a people, we have to consider how that goes. The number three is the whole question of continuous innovation in our newsroom. I'm sure there are many editors on the call, there are many leaders of these newsrooms on the call, and there are media managers on this call. Technology has enabled every Tom, Dick, and Harry to publish their ideas and to publish what it is they're able to see and find. It forces us as a media that then we must then get higher in the value chain so that what we are putting out is a lot more distinguished, is a lot more verified, and is aligned to the interests that serve the public and the audiences that we must of necessity serve. And then finally, the professional that brings this story home, the journalist, we have to pay attention to the welfare of that individual. And we cannot leave it to come as an accident in the process of fixing media. So as we reimagine our landscape, as we reimagine our media, we must ask ourselves, what is the place of the journalist and how do we make sure that day after day after day, critical and consequential professionals find it beneficial and livable to do the journalism. These four steps, I think, will deliver us to an area that can help begin to answer the question of how to get the Kenyan media sustainable once again. In terms of approach, three things as I finish. One, we think, and so far I think it's been possible to be as inclusive as possible so that all the best ideas have a chance to add on to the final answer, the final solution, the final plan that you come back with. But secondly, the media is not an island. We exist to serve the public. We exist to serve citizens. As we go through this journey, we must allow that public and that we must allow citizens to also give us feedback, to also help in defining and enriching the solution and the new landscape that we want to imagine. And then finally, as indeed is happening this morning, I think the key stakeholders, the regulators, the government, us professionals, friends like donors who come in to support us, I think they have a primary role to ensure and to help see this idea going to fruition. I believe it's a hallowed duty we've taken upon, but I also believe that we have many good ideas on this call and with our friends to take us to the next level. So thank you and welcome you, and I look forward to fruitful discussion this morning. Thank you. Professor, is back to you.
All right, thank you very much, those remarks, and I think that sets the stage for what it is that we want to discuss today and achieve, of course, at the end of the day. And I know that some of the delegates or some of the stakeholders have to maybe leave the meeting because of other commitments. So let me quickly call on the chairman of the Media Owners Association, Mr. Waruru Wachira, to make a few remarks. Is Mr. Waruru here? I can't seem to see Mr. Wachira Waruru. Or is anybody else from the Media Association, Amber? Do you know whether Mr. Wachira Waruru is here?
Wachira tells me is on the call. Maybe the admin can unmute him.
All right, I'm not sure whether we've got Mr. Waruru in the house. I'll give him an opportunity when he comes in. I know that Mr. Eric Watnick also indicated that he has another engagement. Maybe we give an opportunity to Mr. Watnick to make a few remarks before we proceed. Mr. Watnick, on behalf of the U.S. Embassy, please welcome to this meeting, and you can make your remarks. Can we please have the person unmuting delegates to do that? And Njeru, I think, Eric, we can hear you now. Please proceed.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please, yes.
Thank you, Professor. It's great to be here. Good morning, everybody. My name is Eric Watnick, and I'm the Counselor for Public Affairs at the U.S. Embassy. I just recently arrived in Kenya about a week ago, and I'm very pleased that this is the first group that I get to meet, although sadly it's only virtually. And I'm thrilled that to be the first group that I meet, it's very important to me that it be you, the senior member of the Fourth Estate. When I came to the office after my quarantine, my staff was telling me that I needed to learn about the public diplomacy poll. And I was very confused when I first got into the office. I was looking around for what that poll might look like. And I thought maybe this was an African tradition that I was unaware of. It wasn't until about 2 days ago that my staff finally told me that what they meant was the Swahili line, pole, pole. They wanted me to learn about things slowly. And so I'm continuing to try and learn, and I hope you'll bear with me as I still continue to learn about the media environment here. I'd like to welcome a number of folks who are on the line, the Principal Secretary for ICT, Mr. Jerome Ochieng, the Director General for the Communications Authority, Ms. Mercy Wanjo, the Chief Executive for the Media Council of Kenya, Mr. David Omwoyo, of course, our friend, the President of the Kenya Editors Guild, Mr. Churchill Otieno, and all of you who are officials of the Kenya Union of Journalists, the Kenya Correspondents Association, and the Association of Media Women in Kenya. You may have noticed on my bio that I've been working with the media for quite a long time, over a couple of decades now, in one capacity or another. My closest interactions with the press was as a US government spokesperson, which was at times quite challenging. You can rest assured that your colleagues pressed me hard for information and access, and I learned a great deal about how these interactions are essential to a well-functioning democracy. And that's why your topic today is critical. It's critical to a strong democracy. Media sustainability, media independence, those things cannot be separated. And media independence is a central component of any democracy. It's an independent media that is able to provide unbiased, accurate, and impartial information to the electorate who must make their choice. The United States Embassy's support of the Kenya Editors Guild is precisely in order to help Kenya's media be unbiased, accurate, and impartial. Over the last 2 years, the United States has provided over 37 million Kenyan shillings to the Kenya Editors Guild Press Freedom Initiative to expand media freedom and independence in Kenya, and to improve the professionalism of journalists, editors, producers, and all who investigate and report the news in Kenya. We're proud of our support, and that has made dozens of workshops and trainings by independent media professionals in investigative and ethical journalism across Kenya possible. It has brought US journalists to speak to Kenyan journalists to share experiences, and has supported the publication of the Kenya Journalism Review. This grant is also helping the Guild bring media, civil society, and government together to help all reach the same objective, a free and independent media and a sustainable one. This grant is not the only initiative. In our third year of supporting, we are also in our third year of supporting the Women in Media Mentorship Program, connecting experienced female journalists, editors, and producers with young women just starting in your profession. Women comprise about 30% of Kenya's media workforce, but continue to struggle with issues of harassment, lack of opportunity, and bias, keeping them from the top positions in your industry. A sustainable media must not just represent, but also include and reflect all members of society. Women are producers, consumers, and reporters of news in all fields in Kenya. Print, broadcast, and digital media must include their voices at all levels. This past year, the embassy has also created a new grant to help build the skills of the independent media. As within the United States, Kenyans have, and I have just learned about here in Kenya, Section 34 of the Kenyan Constitution guarantees that print and all other types of media will be free. In the United States, it is the American First Amendment that protects journalists, and it is that journalists in the United States who are fiercely protective of their independence. It has been the media who have taken the risks to, in the United States to guard their sources and to publish stories even in the face of threatened imprisonment and charges of treason. Many of you may have heard of the history of the Pentagon Papers and the Watergate scandal, and the role that the press and in some cases after many years of investigation. A free press provides impartial facts to an informed electorate to mobilize, to debate, to question, and importantly, to vote. All countries must remain vigilant to guarantee access to information for today's and tomorrow's generations. Friction between a country's government and its media can often be a reflection of both institutions doing their job, and in your case, doing it well. I've already told you that I'm not an expert in the business of media, and I look forward to learning from those speaking today about how you do your work here. So far, I've only been here a week. I'm also sadly not an expert on Kenya's media environment and the legal, regulatory, and economic environment that you're operating under, but I look forward to learning about it. What I can do is draw from my experience to talk to all of you about the relationship between media sustainability and media independence. I can tell you that I've witnessed firsthand how various countries deal with an independent press. Through the constitutions in the United States and my experiences in Singapore and Hungary, all of these countries guarantee press freedoms, but I will tell you that those press freedoms vary greatly and can erode quickly if it's not properly defended. The erosion of a press acting as a government watchdog is a detriment to all its citizens. It is the responsibility of the press to keep the government accountable to the citizens by asking tough questions and investigating how public resources are being spent. You need to be determined in that effort, but determination takes money. In the United States, media outlets earning from digital platforms from both advertising and subscriptions have now surpassed those from traditional print and broadcast channels. You may have read recent news from Time magazine that their digital revenue grew 58% in the second quarter of 2020, surpassing its print revenue for the first time. The New York Times also reported that its digital business earned it $185.5 million during its second quarter of 2020, while the physical print newspapers brought in $175.4 million in the same period. US media outlets have been battling reducing numbers of subscribers and advertisers for decades now, and have experimented with different forms of paywalls, digital subscription packages, and advertising. Almost every country is facing the same challenges in media, and almost every country is feeling some economic pain now as a result of the COVID pandemic. Economic pain that is hitting media houses globally. I would urge all of you to examine, discuss, and learn from other countries' experiences, whether they be neighbors or those of us all the way across the ocean. One fact remains constant. To be sustainable, media must have consumers. Independent journalism that yields well-researched investigative reporting is key to recruiting new readers of newspapers and viewers of TV channels. Clickbait journalism may gain attention for a few minutes, but it won't produce the long-term results that invested consumers of your work produce. The U.S. Embassy grant is intended for the training of journalists and the expanding of the freedom and independence of Kenyan journalists. We hope this goes a long way to help in the sustainability of Kenya's media industry. As has been recently noted here in Kenya, newspapers and broadcast news programs have to change because their place in the hierarchy of news sources has also changed. They no longer break the news. News happens live on social media first, and news is often broken by bystanders or everyday people instead of journalists. So your job is all the more important. Professional and ethical journalism must kick in when the trending stops, provide background, analysis, and additional information. I thank you for inviting me today. I'm already an avid reader of the pile of newspapers that come into my office, even if I need to take notes just to keep you all straight. Thank you so much for your time, and best of luck with your conference. Back to you, Professor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Watnick, for those remarks. As you rightly pointed out, I think media sustainability and independence are very closely related, and we appreciate those remarks, and we appreciate the support that you've offered not only KEG, but the media in this country. I'm sure that the challenges that we face are not peculiar to this country, as you've rightly pointed out, that media around the world is also going through the same challenges, but it's the ability to be able to withstand these challenges, to provide for the media to provide the information that is relevant, that is useful to various audiences that will determine whether it can play its role in the current challenging media landscape. Thank you very much for those remarks. Let me welcome now the CEO of the Media Council, Mr. David Omoyo, to contribute to these conversations. Mr. David Omoyo, welcome, please. You're somewhere in the house. Mr. Moyo, we can't hear you, or at least I can't hear you. And Jerry, can you please unmute Mr. Moyo? Okay, as we wait for Mr. Moyo, perhaps I should ask whether we managed to get Mr. Waruru, Washira Waruru.
All of a sudden, half the speech was off the screen. Okay. Let's see how to do that. Are we muted?
All right, can we please mute our microphones? Okay, Mr. Omoyo, are you in the house? Please proceed. And you may want to put on your video so that people can see you.
Hello? No.
Yes, Mr. Omoyo, now we can hear you. Please proceed. Mr. Moyo, David?
Yes.
Well,
anyway, good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thanks. I had a challenge. I was being gagged by the hosts because I'm being invited to speak and the microphone is switched off, but I believe I'll be able to make a few remarks now. So anyway, welcome participants and those following us online. We appreciate what the other speakers have spoken. The U.S. Embassy, who is one of our good speakers and partners for a long time. KEG Fraternity for this opportunity for us to be part of this. And on behalf of the Media Council, I can assure that our commitment to building strong media associations and strong media fraternity is as deep as it can ever get. We hope that we will not lose the course. I will make a few remarks. Number one is that while we are discussing issues around COVID-19, we can say that COVID-19 has only exposed our soft underbelly. We have been around and we have seen clearly what happened, let's say from about the past 3 years. We've seen a lot of layoffs, drops in circulation numbers and all that. And so while COVID is the catchphrase now, the reality is that the ground has moved. We will say that in the media we are having what people would call a Kodak moment. The world is shifting. And I think that unless we move in and address certain systemic challenges that already started, we will not be able to sustain our media as it is. I think, number one, we may not have post-COVID-19, is here to stay with us. And number two, that the revolution, the Kodak moment in the media has just been accelerated by COVID, and then we have to move. We need to look critically and overhaul this media sector policy and legal framework to create an enabling environment. At the core of policy now, I think we need to look at sustainability, the financing of media enterprises. We all know that out of about 200 community radio stations, less than half of them can afford to pay salaries at the end of every month. We know that out of about 100 print publications, national and local, less than 30 of them have people on a salary. So this is something we need to move quickly from the boardrooms and try to engage other stakeholders and see how we rechannel ourselves. I'm glad Dr. Nyabogo is here. We know that the same challenge is happening at universities. Maybe we expanded too much, or maybe our model is collapsing. We need to come and look at this deeply. You remember that from 2.5 years ago, the Media Council started discussion about the Media Diversity Fund, and we know we moved around it, and it's stuck around certain eventual processes. Although we left a few things pending here and there about who contributes and then who accesses it. But I think that the time has come for us to build that fund. With minimum external financing, we do what government can do and what the media stakeholders themselves can do, so that we come together and make sure that this takes off. Otherwise, when we start a project and sometimes we get stuck in the commas and certain words, we never get to pilot. We never get. By this time, we should be trying to experiment where what went wrong and what we need to improve. We will look at. We need to strengthen that and get bigger policy reforms, especially with the change of how we distribute our media, the online models. Now that everybody is a content creator, what we're going to do about it. We need to discuss about how complaints are done, the Complaints Commission, the procedures and the rules, and how then matters move fast. Because I have to warn you that if anybody has looked at the media sector critically the past, say, 3 months, the number of complaints on my desk, the number of letters from lawyers threatening editors, of course, they get copied across, is very, very high. It then tells you, we have been told before, that number one, corruption strikes back. And number two, the people out there we're trying to hold to account are more organized. They have out-organized and they have outnumbered us, and sometimes they have out-pocketed us. We need to have a session very soon. We are trying to arrange with the Law Society of Kenya and the judiciary. We cannot have so many warnings, media, so many threats, so many, orders that don't make sense. Otherwise, if we let that go on, it will become a new normal and the media can't move. We need to discuss the advertising. But most critically, yes, we discuss about new models and new policy. We need to have a very honest discussion about media audience circulation mechanism that can be a bedrock of genuine commercial media models and revenues. The quarterly reports receive cannot be vouched by anyone except the one who's holding them. The circulation and distribution numbers that we receive, they're only trusted by the person saying them. Nobody else believes that. And this has been something we have refused to face head on. We're going to get to a point where everybody, you get that all Kenya's radio stations are radio number one, all TV stations are TV number one, all newspapers are newspaper number one. So only the person speaking can be believed. So how we model the measurement and how we then discuss the funding model and how to do the business models is what will drive us forward. But finally, we do all that, we must look at the people in the business, the editors and journalists and correspondents and all that, and the media owners, and really distribute the roles of each so that we do not have one or two people taking the entire chunk, but an entire ecosystem discussion, so that then we can, as we look at the policy and those areas, we can be able to move forward. I ask in conclusion that all stakeholders join us together. We move, see where we began, see what we left behind, reduce, there's sometimes too much competition about in our little associations and groups. And those of you who are Christians and have read the good book, they will remember when Jesus' disciples kept arguing on the road, who is the biggest amongst them? And nothing happens when you do that. So I will urge that people come into these discussions with genuine and open hands so that we can have a real honest discussion and move forward. Otherwise, I think that the ground is fertile. All stakeholders are ready for these discussions. We just need to be honestly come to the negotiating table and put proposals forward. And really, we must condemn people whose work is to say no to what the other person is doing and not proposing alternatives. So thanks very much, Keg, and the other team here for what we've done. Let's make sure that we build towards the upcoming convention and all will be good. Allow me now to conclude to give the apology of PS Jerome Ochieng. We spoke this morning. He's down in Kisumu. He couldn't make it because, PS William Bo and the leave couldn't make it. He's at home while doing one or two things, so he couldn't manage. And number two, just a note to our team at the Secretariat, Madam Rosalia. Our media issues fall under the Department of Broadcasting and Telecommunications. And Esther Koimet, not Jerome Ochieng. We know there's a time he was in charge, but we, just for correspondence and all that, we are under the Department of Broadcasting. All media issues in the broadest sense, all of us here from CA and all of us fall there just for information and cooperation. Asanteni sana, and I wish you all very nice discussions. We will look forward to the final report and publication that we can then push forward.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moyo, for those remarks, especially the issue that you've raised, professionalism, that relates very directly to media sustainability. We know sometimes without appropriate sufficient funding, then professionalism seems to take a hit. And you've also mentioned the Media Diversity Fund that we hope to obviously, in today's discussions, one of the things that we hope will come out is a setting up of a sustainability fund that will help the media maybe deal with the current challenges. Thank you very much for those remarks. And I'm hoping that Mr. Waruru is in the house now. Mr. Waruru Wachira, if you're available, please. All right, I don't think we have you in the house. All right, I can't seem to see him. So let's invite, please, can we mute our microphones if we're not? It's a bit okay, I'd like to invite Mercy Wanjau from the Communication Authority of Kenya, the Director General. Is Mercy Wanjau in the house? Or maybe I invite Peter Ikimilu from CA. Peter? I saw Peter in the house earlier. And Jeru, please, if Peter is, I think I can see him. Please unmute Peter.
My senior, Mr. Mbani, is representing Madam Digi. If kindly you can allow him to speak. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Peter. Ambani, please continue. Mr. Alfred Ambani, may I ask Njeru to please unmute Mr. Alfred Ambani?
Hello.
Yes, welcome, Mr. Ambani.
Okay, thank you, coordinator. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Yes, I want to thank the participants and KEG for inviting us to this forum. My name is Alfred Ambani, and I am standing in for our Acting Director General, Madam Mercy Wanjau, who, due to some other prior commitments, she's not able to join us on this forum. So I will make remarks on her behalf this morning. I'm delighted to be part of the conversation on media sustainability during and post-COVID-19. We are meeting in an extraordinary and trying times, but as Harry Gordon Selfridge puts it, there are no hard times for good ideas. This meeting comes at an opportune time, and through the deliberations and ideas that will be shared as an industry, we look forward to solutions that will help us navigate the challenges brought by the global COVID-19 pandemic that has fundamentally affected business, livelihoods, and economies in unprecedented ways. Ladies and gentlemen, as you are all aware, the government of Kenya declared COVID-19 a national pandemic on 13th of March 2020. The outbreak of the pandemic has spawned a global health crisis. And this has led to disruption and loss of many lives. In addition, the pandemic has affected virtually all sectors of the economy, including broadcasting, which is one of the sectors that the Communication Authority is regulating. Media, and especially radio and television subsectors, have continued to play a critical role in dissemination of information to the general public. I'm pleased to note that media contribution has positively complemented other government efforts to control the spread of COVID-19 across our beloved country, Kenya. The authority does not take this for granted. To this end, I take this opportunity to commend all broadcasters who have been running the public service announcements on COVID-19 and related information on their platforms for free upon request by the government. And this information has greatly helped the general public to be aware on what measures that they need to take to stay safe from the COVID-19. The announcements, which have largely focused on measures that the public should take to mitigate the spread of the pandemic, which has been classified as a public emergency in this country. This information so shared has helped to enhance continued awareness nationally. The authority would like to thank broadcasters for diligently and consistently disseminating this crucial information. Additionally, the authority has noted an increase in local programming for children on our media platforms. This has ensured that children's educational needs are met following the closure of educational institutions during this pandemic period. The authority appreciates the continued efforts of broadcasters to empower our Kenyan youth and children to study from home. Ladies and gentlemen, the media is facing serious existential challenges that have been made worse by this pandemic, exacting pressure on the bottom line of most media institutions. Prior to the pandemic, the broadcasting industry was already grappling with increasing competition from over-the-top services and new digital TV players. Digitalization has also resulted in audience segmentation, shrinking of advertising revenue, and disruption of traditional media. Unfortunately, COVID-19 has aggravated the situation for not only the media and its survival, but also journalists whose sources of livelihoods are now threatened by the pandemic. In addition, media operations have been increasingly affected by the social distancing requirements that have been put in place during this pandemic period. Therefore, innovative thinking and strategies are required for media sustainability and viability. In the light of the aforementioned challenges, broadcasters sought regulatory support from the authority during this period, including seeking of waivers of regulatory fees. Cognizant of its facilitative role as the sector regulator, the authority was alive to its obligation to create an enabling environment for broadcasters. The board of the Communication Authority therefore moved with speed to recommend 100% waiver of annual operating license fees for all broadcasters. In addition, the Management Committee of the authority approved a waiver on local content quota requirement during this pandemic period. So meaning that those broadcasters who do not meet the 40% local content quota during this pandemic period will not be penalized because we understand the challenges that are there. It's only during this period. The consideration for the waivers is informed by the serious operational and business challenges that the broadcasting industry has continued to experience during this pandemic period. And as a result, we have noticed a number of broadcasters who have laid off some of their staff because they are struggling to sustain their operations, and some are on half pay and such other measures. The authority has also given 3 months a grace period for broadcasters to remit the outstanding regulatory fees. So they will not, this will give them some relief. As you are aware, the authority is part of the COVID-19 ICT Advisory Committee that was appointed by the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of ICT, Innovation and Youth Affairs on 21st April 2020 to coordinate ICT-specific responses to the effects of COVID-19 pandemic and beyond in Kenya. The COVID-19 ICT Advisory Committee has invited local innovators to submit applications that seek to mitigate adverse impacts of the pandemic in the country. The committee has considered innovations and ICT applications focusing on impacts of COVID-19 on food, the economy, logistics support, security, and livelihoods. Applicants have been requested to unveil the effect of the pandemic on job creation, quality of life, and the Vision 2030, among others. The winning innovations will receive funding from the authority or other government agencies. I wish to call on the media to submit their innovations by September 2020. I wish at this juncture to reiterate the authority's commitment towards continued support to the local broadcasting industry to navigate the challenges posed by COVID-19. We consider this support as key in facilitating a vibrant industry that is responsive to the needs of the consumers. I'm also aware that our sister regulatory agency, the Media Council of Kenya, has developed a draft media diversity fund, and I think that has been mentioned by Mr. Omoyo. This fund, once in place, will be useful in sustaining the media sector players during the post-COVID-19 season. The authority is and remains available to engage with all stakeholders in the media industry to ensure a strong and sustainable media. The current challenges call for all players to work together to develop sustainable solutions for our society. I also urge broadcasters and all media players to embrace innovation in order to remain competitive and relevant in today's dynamic broadcasting environment. I thank you for your attention. Thank you. So that's the end of the remarks from CA. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambani, for those remarks, and we really appreciate your involvement in today's meeting. And as you rightly pointed out, all sectors of the economy are facing challenges, so it's not just the media, but nonetheless, we know the important role the media plays in society. And as you pointed out, there are some of the, for example, measures that you've put in place, including allowing people to remit their whatever it is that they owe the CA maybe a bit later. Maybe it might be prudent to maybe even waive that altogether. But I suppose that's maybe something that may come from the board. But as you also said, no hard times, or good ideas come out all the time. I mean, this is an opportunity for the media, for example, to come out with some good ideas on how to ensure that the media is sustainable, the media is independent, and the media continues to perform its roles in society. Thank you very much once again for those remarks. Let me now call on KJ, Eric Oduor, to make a few remarks as well. Eric, KJ.
Thank you so much, George. You can hear me?
Yes, we can, Eric. Please continue.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, George, for this opportunity and having this conversation so that we are able to get some of the solutions to the problems that we are facing right now. And I think that was the essence of this conference. So I will be very brief, and I'll give a few areas where we need to look at when we are talking about media sustainability. And I'll restrict myself to labor. I think I think the mic is on, making a lot of noise. Anyway, so I will restrict myself to labor when you're talking about media sustainability, because if you do not have labor, then I don't think if we'll be meeting the obligations that were required as the media under Article 34 of the Constitution. So we need to come up with proper structures and set up the standards that will help us to retain and also attract the talent that we require to continue with a vibrant media here in Kenya, because Kenya actually provides one of the best journalists in this continent. You can only compare us maybe with Kenyan media with South Africa and Nigeria, but I still believe that we are among the best in Africa. So for us to maintain and also retain and attract talent,
hilo linitumia tu hiyo ya washira.waroro@royalmedia.
Can we all please mute our microphones if you're not talking? Eric.
Thank you so much, George. Yes, sir. Okay, thank you. So what I was saying is that we need to create structures and standards that will help us. I know we are talking about labor. We used to have such kind of confusion in the industry until mid-1970s when the late Majid Koka actually realized that we cannot have professionals in the media if we do not have pay and remuneration structures. And he was able to help us to come up with one, and actually that has actually guided the industry for a number of decades. So at the moment, that might not be relevant because we've had new players who have come on board since mid-1970s. So we need to have such conversation with the media owners. I hear from you that one of the speakers here is actually the chair of a Media Owners Association, and we also have other media associations that represent different owners. So we need to start having those structured talks so that we can also set standards. If we do not set standards for the professionals in the media, then we have got no moral obligation to start talking about media sustainability, because if we do not have labor, then there is one area that actually will be pulling apart from the rest of the system. So we must have that conversation. And why am I saying that we have those structured talks? Is only from those structured talks that we'll also be able now to engage the government and present some proposals to the government in terms of ensuring that if the government can give some tax rebates or tax waivers on equipment that we're using and in some other areas that are important, because there is no need of levying some of these taxes when the industry that you're levying these taxes is actually dying. So we need to revive them, we need to protect them, we need to come up with the measures that will cushion them against collapse. Then actually, if you look at the long term, they will they'll become active, and whatever the taxes actually that the government actually had, the waivers that the government had actually extended to this area, definitely they will start yielding fruits at some particular point. So it's not something that is actually is a lost cause, but we only need to have these structured talks so that we can sit together with the government as alternative to a media diversity fund. Media diversity fund will not pay salaries if the media owners or the investors are not saving to ensure that they are able to sustain their payrolls. So media diversity fund is one of the areas that we need to emphasize on so that we're able to find a way how we can fund media development work. But again, if you want to talk about labor needs a very clear and sustainable revenue streams for the media investors. So that means that we need to sit together with all the relevant stakeholders, and that's actually the proposal that you're making as KUJ. Other than coming here to lament, we need to give ideas on how we can address this. So we need these structured talks where we'll bring all of us together and engage other stakeholders who are relevant to this cause, so that we're able to address these things in the long term. Otherwise, at the moment, we are suffering from some of these, media actually suffering from some of these, the effects of COVID-19 as a result of lack of preparedness. And even if another crisis actually strikes again after COVID-19, God forbid, we'll still find ourselves in the situation where we are. So for us to avoid this COVID-19 crisis is supposed to serve as a lesson to us as the media, as stakeholders, that we need to have the structured way of addressing the solution, the problems that we are facing, so they're able to have the solutions. We are not the only ones who are suffering, but the whole world is suffering. And but some other countries actually have already started recovering, and they can see that there is a future for some of these organizations. So that is only will also make you, Professor Nyabuga, relevant to your students, because if you are appearing before students and these students see that there is no future in the media, they'll not be motivated. But if you are seen to coming up with different ideas that will can help us to do that, we'll be able also to motivate the students. Another reason why we need to have these structured talks with the level and with authorities that are relevant to this area. The government is talking about going to start levying taxes on digital platform. But some of these social media giants, these companies, they are benefiting from the content that is generated by the media. How are we going to get a share of that? Because this is content that is generated with us. These companies are using this content. We also deserve a share of it. So if the government wants to go there to start levying these taxes, we need to sit also with the government so that we can also get a share of the taxes that they're going to levy on these social media giants. That is what is happening, so that we are also able to protect our intellectual property rights, so that journalists can gain some income from their work that is shared worldwide by these social media and also these blogs and internet and platforms that are on the internet. So those are some of the areas that I think as a union we will want to have some serious discussions with relevant authorities, so that we're able to protect labor in the media industry. Otherwise, thank you so much, George, for steering this conversation. I can see people are coming up with very good ideas that if we're able to put together in a report at the end of this conference, then in another 3 or 4 months, we'll be able to have a very solid paper that will provide solutions to the problems that COVID-19 impact has actually caused in the media industry. Thank you so much. Over to you, George.
All right. Thank you very much, Eric, for those remarks. As you've rightly pointed out, the welfare of journalists in this country is important. I think without addressing the labor issues, remuneration issues, the safety and security of journalists, then we will have challenges within the media sector. Thanks for those remarks. I'm sure they will contribute to further conversations when we open this up. But let me invite Marceline Nyambala, the Executive Director of AMWIC, to especially talk about gender issues and inclusivity, because we've often been told that gender issues are critical to the way the media operates, to the way the media performs, and consequently to media sustainability. Welcome, Marceline.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Professor George Nyabuga. Thank you, Editors Guild, for putting this event together. We acknowledge owners, we acknowledge KJ, Kenya David Moyo, Communication Authority, and our partners from the embassy, Eric Watnick. For us, Association of Kenya, we feel the issue about gender inclusivity is at the heart of our conversation. And I am glad that
Eric, can you please mute your microphone? All right, Marceline, please continue.
Yeah, I'm glad that our plans develop a document out of these discussions. And I do agree that this is a Kodak moment, as Omoyo put it, that a moment whereby we have an opportunity to look at the environment and innovate. So looking at sustainability, the definition that I came up with is a media outlet that survives or thrives while generating quality journalism. And when you're talking about quality journalism, there are many aspects. You're talking about time, you're talking about skills, and you're talking about people. And when all this is being looked at, we feel that when you're talking about training, we're talking about recruitment, then we need women to be included. But equally key are voices of women in terms of sources and experts. Currently, together with our partners from Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, we are just looking at some of the impact of COVID on women, SMEs, small and medium enterprises. And this is a market. These are voices that are often lacking. And this, again, I've said before, they hold the potential for classified adverts that can equally contribute to the sustainability of media. And so all this needs to be looked at. But it is easy to help them grow. When we are talking about journalism that we want to reimagine, we want to rethink, we're talking about journalism, quality journalism that we want to bring on board, where we are able to pay our journalists, and we're talking about journalism, about financial accountability, journalism about transparency, but journalism that is able to question corruption. If we look at our country, Kenya, where 1/3 of our budget is getting lost, in corruption, I believe that this 1/3 is enough to keep media, even if we take a half of that 1/3, a proportion of it is able to support journalism. But when we have that scenario where we have high levels of corruption, these are the things we want to look at. Then you can imagine that this is affecting taxpayers, is affecting the purchasing power, it's affecting people in business, and therefore they are not able to even buy advertising. And looking at the context of sustainability in terms of other issues, technology, and looking at the economy as well as law and policy. We have, as already pointed out, if we look at our media houses, all of them are the over 60 television stations, the over 100 radio stations, the newspapers. Are we having the technology that is able to deliver it to our audiences? I think that's a question we can keep asking ourselves. But from what the president of Editors Guild alluded in his speech, where we have 30% of these media houses that are most of these papers are not able to pay salaries, then we are able to see that currently majority of the media houses are not sustainable. because in terms of money in terms of money going to the journalist, and the implication is perhaps the brown envelope corruption, where and it which also has its implication in terms of reportage. In terms of economy, our economy as we speak, and of course there is the shift. Yes, there is technology, so the shift of advertising to online spaces. And I like what Eric has said, that if the government is discussing taxing the online spaces, how is the revenue sharing going to take place, considering that a lot of content that these channels are having, either it is people have generated the content for free. I know there are already payment models like in YouTube to people, but a lot of the content are aggregated from the dailies, from Nation, from Standard, from KTN, Citizen. They aggregate the content, they share, they go viral, and therefore they're able to earn from, generate even from the data that they sell the data from content generated from the mainstream media. So how is that the sharing going to be? Our laws and policies, certainly how our conversations, which we have been having in terms of operationalizing access to information. Again, access to information is going to contribute to quality journalism, quality journalism that is bringing accountability. Part of the challenge that is facing us is related to our context, our economic context in the country. And I think the concern that was expressed, that I want to agree, of the hefty fines. Hefty fines, are they justified? Are these hefty fines justified? But it is a pushback, and how much are we able to, as a strong media, push back so that we do not have those? So it is, we saw the COVID billionaires, and I think some of them are already going to court. But it is because they are able to bully the media. How much are we able to say, which kind of structures do we want to build so that we have all these fines, $20,000 hefty fines for media houses, $5,000 for individual journalists. So this hangs as a threat and affecting the journalist. And the conversations that Eric is talking about, that we have structured conversations. These conversations, there is what the media owners can do, there is what we as individual journalists can do, and then there is what we as association, the media stakeholders, are able to help. And part of what we are able to help as media stakeholders is maybe when we are looking at the models, and we've had the business models, public service model, we have market model, we have community radio stations who are relying on volunteer skills as part of the people who are working in those media houses, and hope that from time to time communities are able to contribute to them. What kind of model will we reimagine that is going to work for us, and how? And I think this will require levels of media literacy, information literacy, so that people know that they need to intentionally invest in the media, so that how do you distribute your advertising revenue? But I was just reflecting and thinking about who are currently advertising, because this is at the heart of the conversation, and looking at county governments are advertising. You find it is universities, there is some personal care, some food companies, and are we able to have a media that we to create that is going to be able to help expand this number of people, and basically a media that is able to deliver on enabling economic development, and still I'm saying that the women who are trying to do business, the women who are the markets, the ordinary women, the ordinary, what kind of the issues that they are facing, are we able to now reflect and say, well, we have focused so much on politics, we have focused so much on what the people said yesterday is no longer true. When they said this about the party, by December, they're not in that party. So was this the truth? You know, so what kind of truth do we want to reimagine and invest in so that we are able to deliver an economy that is able to sustain us as a media? So I know also in terms of gender, we have also done work. I see Juta here with DW around online violence. And when you're talking about women, we have had people who say, you know, now because of these online attacks, I plan to only work for this number of years. And you see, again, constantly turnover, the turnover, you know, the turnover of our journalists. And when you're talking about turnover, just to reflect again further on it, how do we have models that is able to take advantage of many of the people who are now not working full-time in the media house, but we are able to bring models that are flexible. The flexible model will really work for women. Are we able to bring in, because we have a lot of good journalists who have been retrenched, what kind of models can we put together? I know in some media houses, people have been working 1 week, you take leave 1 week, just to enable the media to sustain everybody who was on board, that they are not retrenched. So now that people have been retrenched, and now we are remodeling and rethinking and reimagining what kind of models would work for us. So just as a wind up, I think is also, can we look at things, other models, other things that are happening? I'm looking at a situation where, like in the banking sector, financial sector, we've seen a lot of mergers and acquisitions, you know, like, so can some media houses merge together, even if they're community stations? Can they merge together so that they are able to now be stronger, put together resources? And those, I think those are conversations now that can be had at the level of the media owners. But rather than have people who are not paid salaries, people who, you know, they don't have means of going to get their work, you know, any shock can easily destroy them. So let's borrow from the banking sector. They are where very, very quickly they merge together. So just to wind up, yeah, is just to reiterate that at the heart of the what we are going to reimagine is inclusivity, is women as the women working in the media houses, but also as voices, but also as the potential market who will come to advertise, irrespective of the money. But I believe that a lot of the SMEs that are seeing, they are able to advertise. I'm seeing some of the bloggers, like Friday Market, you find people are giving them 1,000 to just put a tweet or something on Instagram. And I think, and it's because for us, you know, to advertise, even now, currently, this week we have been buying, we have been buying media space for that project on women in business. And it's very expensive, you know, it's very expensive. It's actually unaffordable because, so how can we bring in cheaper, more affordable, let me not say cheaper, more affordable products, but we are able to serve the audiences and people who we are able to help grow their business that can help us later. Thank you very much, George. I look forward to the document that will come from, and thank you for this opportunity. Asante.
Thank you very much, Maslin, for those remarks. As you said, transparency is key, and I'm sure women journalists are, you know, obviously contributing greatly to media sustainability. And of course, it's always good to have Amweek on board. And now we have Mr. Waruru Wachira, the chair of the Media Owners Association. Please, Mr. Wachira, welcome to the meeting, and Yes, the floor is yours now. Mr. Wachira, we can't hear you. Hello, Mr. Wachira? Can everybody hear me? Seems Mr. Wachira can't. All right, Mr. Wachira, are you? Your microphone is unmuted, but we can't hear you. Hello? All right, it seems that we can't hear Mr. Wachira for some reason. I'm not sure, maybe we are suffering challenges with our technology. So when, again, we are able to hear Mr. Wachira, we'll invite him to
Yes, George?
make his... Yes?
Hello? We can talk
Yes.
to him here. Mr. Waruru, please carry on.
Thank you very much. I'm so sorry. Don't hear me clearly. Can you hear me now?
Yes, but from very far. Yes, but please proceed, Mr. Wachira.
Yeah, so sorry about that, the technical problems. But first, I'd like to thank the Editors Guild for organizing this conference. I think it's a very good and timely initiative. And I hope that these discussions about our sustainability will now become a regular feature of the industry moving forward. I'm particularly happy to make acquaintance with you again, Professor Nyabuga. I think we shared a newsroom 15 or so years ago. So it's very nice to make contact again, and Marceline as well. So allow me to give you a little background from my perspective. This particular initiative has come about as a result of the impact of the pandemic on our industry. And I must say that the summary of the state of the media has been captured very well by all the speakers so far. Very comprehensive perspectives. So I don't need to repeat those details, other than to say that the financial impact has been devastating, to the extent that hundreds of jobs have been affected. However, it's important, as has been pointed out here by several of you, to point out that the financial situation of the Kenyan media was already very, very shaky before the pandemic. First, there's a well-known reality that with the dawn of the digital age, traditional media globally was slowly losing revenue to online platforms. This has been stated very clearly here today. And over and above that, there was a general economic slowdown for much of last year. And this resulted in a decrease of advertising revenues. So 2019 was not a good year for us. And if you can recall, it was at the end of November last year that the Standard Group issued a profit warning. And when one media house raises the red flag, you can be sure it's an industry-wide problem. So this year, 2020, started at a very slow pace. And the revenues in January and February were lower than at the same time last year. So we were already bracing ourselves for a very tough 2020. And then COVID hit and dealt us a very heavy blow. In fact, one can say that COVID hit us when we were already down, because advertising revenues, which were already depressed, literally collapsed. And newspaper sales were devastated. So as a means of survival, we were left with no choice but to carry out the very painful, massive pay cuts and layoffs across the industry. Several hundred employees were laid off, and many more suffered pay cuts. And that is why we are having this conference to discuss media sustainability and during and post-COVID. And I'd like to make a few observations. First, we need to recognize and remind ourselves that this is a global problem. The pandemic has forced media houses all over the world to engage in layoffs and pay cuts. And quite a few newspapers in the West actually suspended their print operations. The New York Times estimated that up to 36,000 employees of media companies in the US were either laid off or suffered pay cuts. In fact, they went on to describe it as the most significant forced exodus of media employment in recent history. So we're not in this alone, and as we deliberate about our future, I would urge that we observe what is happening elsewhere and see what lessons we can learn from the rest of the world. The second point I'd like to raise is that this forum has a very heavy emphasis on the plight of journalists. And this is understandable because this forum is driven by journalists. And I am one of them. And the well-being of journalists and the protection of media freedoms are paramount to the survival of media. But may I suggest that we need to look beyond journalists and think about the survival of the industry as a whole. Because our very survival is in question. Because we're dealing with two big challenges, that is the pandemic and the threat of traditional media is facing from digital media. We as management have tried to do whatever we can to ease the impact of the pandemic. Apart from the measures we've taken internally, we've also reached out to government. Someone mentioned tax breaks earlier on, we've sought those. We've actually also written to the CA requesting for the suspension of license fees. And of course, we've approached the government and said if the government can come up with a rescue package for tourism, surely why not media, considering the crucial role we also play in this economy. But moving forward, we all know that the internet and social media in particular are full of alternative sources of content. And has been said here by several panelists, we are no longer the gatekeepers of news and entertainment. We all know that as more and more people are consuming their news and entertainment online, and with the cost of data dropping slowly, and the cost of smartphones also dropping, these numbers are starting to grow. This is a wave that can't be stopped. And even though we, the traditional media outlets, are still the biggest players in online news, we haven't been able to monetize this online presence. So the question we should be asking ourselves others have said, is how are we going to survive in this new environment? What do we need to do to adapt to these realities? How can we reverse the loss of revenue? Which innovations can we come up with to unlock new revenue streams in the digital space? And as has been raised severally, what about our business models? Are they sustainable? Do we have the right structures to thrive in a changing world? And what is the role of technology in our march towards the future? We all saw that as a result of the COVID-19 lockdown, media houses adapted to technology, and news anchors and reporters were delivering bulletins from their homes. This was a major shift. What implications does it have for news delivery moving forward? And I think several questions have been asked about how our journalists are going to evolve and our newsrooms into the digital age, and how we will maintain our relevance. So these are the tough questions that all media houses are asking themselves. And I'm hoping that this forum will contribute to these discussions. And the good thing about this forum is that it is seeking a collective thought process. And I hope we will come up with some, if not all, the answers to these questions. I'm very hopeful myself and confident that we will overcome these challenges. And I'd like to emphasize on behalf of the MOA and confirm that we support this initiative. We will participate in this initiative, and we're looking forward to the recommendations. So that's it from me. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm sorry again for the technical problems.
Thank you so much, Mr. Waruru Wachira, for the remarks.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Mr. Waruru Wachira, and he's raised important questions. Hello, you can hear? Hello?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay. So he's raised important questions about media ownership and the blow that COVID has dealt on the industry, and pledging support for the process. But he's also raised questions that this forum should seek to answer on the implications for COVID on the news delivery moving forward. And I hope that as we move forward, we'll be able to answer these questions. So I'll take over from George for a while, and we'll move now to the next speaker, who is the chairperson of the Kenya Correspondents Association. So I'd like to invite Mr. Olo Janak. Janak, are you in the house?
Yeah, I'm available.
Thank you. He will speak to us about the welfare of correspondents, tell us the situation with them, and sustainability in a difficult environment that they work in. So thank you so much, and welcome, Mr. Olo Janak.
Okay, thanks, colleagues, for this conference, and I thank the Kenya editors, all the other media stakeholders that planned this. I think it's an important forum for us to discuss the way forward in terms of media sustainability. I will share on this platform, and some of them will echo what our colleagues have said. But let me mention them quickly in terms of what I prepared in terms of speaking notes. one of the things that I think is important for us as journalists is that the correspondents have been the worst hit because many of them did not even have dependable income from the media sector. And as we discuss this, and I've heard from Wachira Waruru and all the others, and Wachira Waruru has raised the question of perhaps more focus on journalists, and that we need to also look at the suffering of the media houses and the those kind of frameworks. I think I want to agree, and that now that we have been caught up together in this, we need to think together, because previously we have never been able to think together. Sometimes journalists have been thinking in a different way, and then media houses or media managers and editors have been thinking in a completely different way. But right now we are caught up in the same thing. So I'm inviting all of us as an industry to think together and know that we are all we are all in this deep hole. Now, over this period, we know that journalists have suffered, and media houses, I think Wachira has indicated, since last year, sales have been low and they have been hit as well. What is going to happen now? And I'm speaking in terms of what we have checked out from our team of correspondents across the country, is that the 5 or so months of COVID have taught people certain lessons, that the media is an extremely bad employer, is very, very exploitative. And faced with a situation like COVID, their default reaction is to sacrifice journalists. And for us, that is a big concern, because now, if, for example, they saw that things were getting worse last year, what were some of the thoughts that they were putting together in terms of overcoming some of those challenges before COVID? And now that COVID has compounded the problem, what are they thinking about? Is the thinking just to sacrifice journalists in terms of cutting costs? So that's a question we must think about. And therefore, we are saying that because journalists have suffered, and largely because of the reaction of media owners and the managers, what we are going to see is a huge transition within the media industry, and that will lead to loss of qualified and experienced journalists and staff from the media sector. Because the 5 months have taught journalists that media cannot sustain them, and therefore they are thinking about alternatives. So the media sector must be prepared for a huge loss of many, many journalists because they are thinking about alternatives. And especially for correspondents and freelancers, many of them will think about how have they been able to survive over the last 5 months when the media has actually stopped their pay or not, or slashed their pay, or even their retainers. And I saw a warning from one media house saying that if the journalists are not going to produce in a certain level, then even their retainer will be withdrawn. For us at the Kenya Correspondents Association, we think that the media sector, especially the media owners and editors, have been extremely cruel in terms of how they are dealing with journalists, and especially the correspondents. And therefore, we are saying that in thinking through media sustainability, our position is that media sustainability depends on trained and well-remunerated manpower with a good working environment and respect for human rights. The working environment must respect the labor rights of journalists. So if this is not going to be taken into consideration, then we are not going to talk about, they can have money. Media houses can have money to maintain their structures and the studios and so on. But if they don't have the requisite manpower, then what is going to happen? So I'm appealing to media stakeholders and the media owners, the managers, the editors, that as we think through this together, we must, at the center of it, think about how do we ensure that the critical manpower that drives the media industry, and that is the journalists, are well taken care of, despite all the difficulties. I mean, media houses have been making some sort of profits. They have some backup. How come they felt that the immediate thing was to ensure that journalists were left suffering? Some of them could not even pay for months and months, and even some of them are not paying now. So that is a concern to us. The respect for labor rights is a critical thing. We must do away with the cruelty, the exploitative approach by media owners and managers, and that this is what is going to help the media, sustain itself, even as we look at the other expenditure areas. Now, the other thing I want to say is that media outlets need to review their production and operational models to cut out non-core expenditure and be more innovative to survive. If you look through the media establishments, some of them are spending money on non-core areas, ostentatious, expenditure, and they have huge expenditure on the top managers. They could reduce the management and do. They are spending money on management. They are spending money on other areas that are non-core. For them to survive, they must be able to rationalize the expenditure in some of those areas to release money, especially for the journalists and other core areas. And I think Marceline also talked about mergers. We have far too many unsustainable media outlets. It is important for them to begin thinking about mergers and or collaboration in content generation and creation, because this will reduce unnecessary competition in non-essential areas. The other thing I wanted to point out is that we as journalists must also prepare to gradually transit from the permanent employment model to producing competitive content for sale to media houses at competitive rates. The whole question of permanent employment, I think, in future may be unsustainable because some of the media houses that have been set up cannot sustain permanent employment. I mean, that is true. If the big ones are suffering, then what about the smaller ones? So journalists must also begin to re-engineer their thinking and say, look, I don't have to be permanent employed, but then I can produce quality content that I can sell to the media houses. And then as we talk about competitive, or competitive content or top-notch content, then we must also think about how the industry can set up a team or a task force or an advisory team to manage the graduated payment rates for the content that is produced by journalists, especially the freelancers, because there will be many of them in correspondence. Because previously, we have had a situation where media houses take one copy or content that is produced by a correspondent, sells it in multiple avenues and raises money, and then they don't even credit the journalists. Some of this must now stop so that we set up a team in the industry that is going to say how, from the low, what is the bare minimum that can be paid for content? We have had content which is personally suffered where my content is produced. I mean, I produce content and then it is sold and I'm not paid anything. So this must begin to stop. So I think I'm suggesting that we need to put up a team. It can be a task force. It can be an advisory team that should look at the rate of payments for content produced by freelance journalists or correspondents and any other person who will be creating content to reduce exploitation so that we establish a basic minimum in terms of what is it that can be paid. So if we are going to sell content to media houses, then they must be ready to buy content at some competitive rates. And therefore, we should have no excuse about which story is accepted and then they are not paying for. I would also like to suggest that journalists must now leverage on technology to survive. We must change the mode and content of our stories and seek opportunities beyond national boundaries. Kenya alone will not make journalists in Kenya survive because we have far too many journalists in Kenya. And I want to suggest in terms of using technology, they should also, many of them have been setting up their own online content. I think we need to up the game in terms of online content and find a way of monetizing that online content, and that the online content or media that we set up must also be made as credible as possible. The other point, and I'm concluding, would be that the media industry must engage with the government and seek financial support for their operations. Across the globe now, I'm relating with the certain frameworks in Africa, and across Africa now, many media organizations and formations are engaging with the government because media is treated as an essential service, and the government must see media as an essential service. And therefore, the engagement with the government is to convince the government that they must be able to pay for this essential service. And the payment may not be necessarily direct payment. It should include tax reductions. It should include exemptions on newsprint, equipment, and other items that are core to media operations. Because some of these are extremely expensive and they make the cost of running media very, very expensive. So I want to suggest that as media stakeholders, we should not be shy to engage with the government and tell them that the monies they are receiving on our behalf, either from taxes or from donors, like right now we have the emergency fund, the emergency COVID fund that is being pilfered. How come that we are not looking at the media as an important component of mobilization and intervention against COVID to spend money on it. And instead we see money being pilfered left, right, and center. We must make demands for our own South Africa, and a few other countries, which we can look at examples from. Latin America, a bit of this is happening. So in conclusion, I would like to also suggest that the industry and the government should work on modalities for setting up a media sustainability fund. And as we talk about the media sustainability fund, we must look carefully at the management of this media sustainability fund. And this, I'm suggesting that it must be open and transparent, and media stakeholders must be part of the management. If we are not part of the management, then the government can use this to capture the media. The government can use this to untwist the media. Because across the globe and across Africa, the fear of engagement and support from government in terms of some of this funding is in terms of using that to actually twist the media, not to be critical. So those are things that we need to look at. And I think this conversation is important. We must be honest about the conversation we are having. We must be transparent, and we must sustain this kind of conversation into the future. And in conclusion, I would like to say that this conversation should carry all of us. I want to appeal to Wachira and the media owners. I want to appeal to, of course, the Editors Guild has been very, very engaged. I want to appeal to all sectors of the media that we must work together. The thinking that sometimes we can disengage when our interests are not so much at stake is not something that we can now afford to have. That attitude, we must stop it. I wish to thank you for listening. I'll share my speaking notes with the Rosalia, the organizers, and it can be put together with the others so that we make up a position that we can move forward with. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you, Janak. You've talked about media not shying away from engaging with government, and also you're proposing a task force or an advisory board to be created to look at remuneration for correspondents, and that task force should set the bare minimums that correspondents must be paid. Okay, so next, I'd like to invite the Digital Broadcasters Association. Joel Karanja, are you on board?
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Joel. Karibu.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I said good afternoon. I'll try to make my comments and contribution very brief, because I'm speaking when most of the panelists have spoken, and they have touched on some of the issues that I'd listed as part of my presentation, and I will not want to be repetitive. And what brings us together is the effect of COVID-19, which came as a wake-up call to the media industry that we need to come together for our survival. But just beyond, just to take a step back, this exposes the media industry. Most of the time, we are reactional in our approach to things, that we only come together when we are faced with a challenge. And instead of having a long-term continuous engagement that will seek to explore what is coming and how we can be able to best address it for the sustainability of the media industry. I will give an example of the disruption that was brought about by the digital migration, because I think that is where the rain begin hitting us. If you look at the experience that we had, that is about between 2012 and 2015, one of the biggest challenges that we had is we had two groups. We had those who have been there earlier, the Media Owners Association and the people they represent, who are pushing for delayed migration. We had the people that I represent, the newcomers who are pushing for the migration to take place. If you look at that time, we never got an opportunity to sit down and explore the opportunities that were being presented by the digital migration, so that all of us together, we can begin to tap into it. We just looked at the challenges and the effect that will come in, and we took sides. So we were not playing the game from the same side. For us, we are pushing for it to happen, because by so happening, we'll be able to get viewership and all that, and be able to push our business. The Media Owners Association, and that explains why we ended up having two associations representing the media industry. We have the Media Owners Association and Digital Broadcasters Association. Now, there were so many opportunities which were presented then, which to this day, I believe we have not tapped into. And now, as we look at the impact of COVID-19, what opportunities, and I like what the CEO Media Council said, we are not just looking at during the COVID-19, but also post. But in his comment, he said, we may have to live with COVID-19. So can we look at a solution or a strategy that is not just attached to the happening that are occurring in terms of the COVID-19, so that we are looking at media sustainability, not tied just to COVID-19, but in the future. Now, having mentioned that, I think after the digital migration, the next big disruption that came is the disruption by the online platform. We got a lot of those platforms which began eating into our cake in terms of the advertising revenue that we were enjoying before. And by 2020, I agree with what my colleague Washina Waruru was saying. By the time 2020 was coming, the situation was already dire, but this all started earlier. This just came to aggravate the situation which was already happening already. So in terms of media sustainability, looking at the shrinking ad spend, the competition that has come, we have a lot of over-the-top services, we have a lot of other platforms which have been creating, which are competing for the same revenue that we are looking at. I would recommend, and looking at what we have been doing, one of the things, and I think Janak and Nyambara mentioned, we have to begin exploring things to do with partnership. And when I'm talking about partnership, is in the context of marketing. This is something that we have been exploring as Digital Broadcasters Association, by appreciating that each one of us has a niche and an audience that the other cannot be able to reach because of the diversity of the programming that we are having. So we have been exploring issues to do with joint marketing. We are looking at issues of share partnership in terms of creation of content, because this is very key. And when I'm there, you'll find most of them have a lot of resources that they have invested in over a period of time, some which are not in use and which may be used by another station which is starting. How can we be able to get value out of that investment which is lying idle? In terms also of content, we have to begin looking at different models of monetizing our content. If you look at the traditional model, whereby we just produce content, put it on our TV, hoping to attract bigger viewership, and after that we'll be able to attract advertisers on board. Then if that content does not do well, then it is shelved and archived, and you have content of 10, 15 years, which is not in use. There are so many other opportunities which have been presented whereby media houses can be able to repackage and repurpose their content and be able to generate revenue out of that content. And this is an area that we have not been able to explore. Some of the content that we have already used within our market, can it find market within other jurisdictions, in other nations? Can it be dubbed in other languages and find other channels in other continents and other countries that content can be monetized? So as long as we look at the traditional model of revenue generation, the chances of survival is very minimal. So we have to begin to look at other ways of monetizing our content. The other thing which has not been touched and which now speaking from the owners who not only are looking at journalists and looking at creating content, is an issue, and I'm happy that C is also represented. As we go forward and as we look at the issue of media sustainability, the issue of signal distribution is key. I think over the last 1 year, we have had several of our members having to go on and off several times because of the cost that they're incurring in terms of carrying their signal to different sites across the country. And I know just for this meeting, for you to be countrywide, you are paying almost 2 million per month. Now, with the challenges that we are facing, it may not be sustainable to be able to pay that cost and sustain your business. That is just one cost that a media house has to incur. So from the regulator, which is the CA, this is an issue that requires us to rethink what are other models that we can be able to adopt to be able to reduce the cost that the broadcasters or the media houses are incurring in terms of distribution of signal. The other issue, still on the same, is the issue of conflict of interest. As we move forward, I know all of us are playing in the free-to-air market, but in the digital migration, we ended up having the signal distributors that we have, the common carriers. We have Signet and we have PAN. These two signal distributors have also interest in subscription television. You go to Signet, they're also affiliated to GoTV. You go to PAN, they're affiliated to StarTimes. Now, how does that go, or how does that affect the dedication of the signal distributors that we have towards flourishing of the free-to-air channels that we have across the country? So that is a question that we need maybe to address in terms of regulation and all that. The other thing that I would want us, as we look and as think about media sustainability, is the issue of agencies. Agencies have great impact on the operations of media and media houses. And when I talk about agencies, I'm talking about GAA. I think all of us, I don't need to belabor that. All of us know the challenges that we have been facing with GAA as an industry. But not just GAA, we have agencies which are not regulated, and yet they are playing a major part in the media industry. We don't have any regulator under which all these agencies fall. And the worst of it is you'll find now we have one major agency which is controlling almost 70%, 70 to 80% of the ad spend across the country. Now, what is the impact of that in the media industry? We should have a policy or a regulation to regulate all these agencies. And bearing in mind, in terms of advertising, all these agencies relying on audience data, and I don't know whether it is Dr. Moyo who mentioned, currently, over all the years that this industry has existed, we have no reliable, accurate, up-to-date audience measurement mechanism in place. We still have to rely on day after recall, whereby CAF or Geopol are calling the viewers or panelists to find out what did they consume last night. Yet, if you look at other jurisdictions, we have moved to passive, whereby we can be able to get real-time audience measurement. Yet now, on the data that we get, which is not reliable, is the basis of the spend or making decision that touches billions of shillings that is spent on media. So these are areas that we need to address as we look at media sustainability. Lastly, we need to look at all the players or the stakeholders that are playing in this media industry, in the entire ecosystem, because we cannot talk about sustainability when we have left some of the players. And that's why I have brought in the issue of agencies. They have a very big part to play in the media industry. We have to look at the people who are doing audience measurement. They have a critical part to play in the sustainability of the media industry. And lastly, all the players in terms of, we have the public broadcasters, we have the commercial broadcasters, and also we have the community broadcasters. The reason being, we cannot say that we have media which is sustainable when some of the media houses are struggling. And just mentioning what Janak was saying, we have a lot of correspondents spread across the country. And if you look at the model that has been working, is them only being able to send stories to a few media houses. Yet, even in the grassroots, we have several media houses where maybe they would have sent the stories at a lower rate and be able to sustain themselves, even when the bigger media houses are not able to take in their stories. So as we talk about media sustainability, I would urge that we get a joint and unified approach and ensure that no key stakeholder is left out, so that all their input is put together and we can be able to come up with a document that can be able to shape this industry moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Joel Karanja from Digital Broadcasters Association. And you've weighed in on the issue of monetizing content that has been generated over the last years. How do we repurpose it and make it useful in other jurisdictions, in other nations, to create money? So we'll move next to Tom Boyer. Tom Boyer, who is the chairperson at the Kenya Community Media Network. So welcome, Mr. Tom Boyer.
Thank you, Rosalia. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're audible.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invite. And I must appreciate the team that worked into bringing this conference to be. I wouldn't like to, most of the things have been said, but I will concentrate purely on matters touching on the community radio stations. During this pandemic, I remember the community radio stations have really somehow suffered, but like it has been said, every situation brings some new challenges and opportunities comes with it. So the idea behind community broadcasting is that it is broadcasting by the community for the community, and it's pegged within some very 5 key pillars, which is community ownership, community participation, non-profit model, and I think that is where there is a point of departure from the mainstream media, who are doing like an enterprise, a business, where they are looking for returns, and like Waruru alluded to, now when those returns are not coming as expected, then there is an expected, there is a need to probably lay off some people or to cut off on some spendings and all that. And the other key component of this is, which has been really affected, is on the community participation, because community needs to participate in the content generation and all that. And given the spaces that the community media or community radio stations work in, their small spaces, and therefore, given the guidelines
Tom, you're losing you.
of health, it is difficult or rather impossible for
Tom, we lost you. Maybe use audio alone. So as we wait to reconnect to Tom,
Hello?
hi Tom, proceed.
You can hear me now?
Yeah, maybe you could try use audio alone.
That is what I've done now. Now, I've had good proposal coming from the speakers, Masli Nyambala, also Janak, and even Joel on the question of merging and all that. But again, I think we need to think through this because we are looking at community radio stations as outfits that are for a particular community of interest. And this community of interest could be on issue-based or geographic. And when I talk of issue-based, I mean probably they'll be discussing or focusing on a particular subject of interest to the community. And therefore, probably merging them might be a challenge. And even in terms of the geographic, for instance, Wajir Community Radio Station, for instance, and Baliti stations, for instance, I don't think there is that possibility of them merging. But I agree that we may want to work on the question of how do we collectively market these stations. And believe you me, like I told you earlier, is that they are formed on not-for-profit models. So the marketing here for the community radio stations and which kind of community media network have started to do a joint marketing of these is because of the question of numbers. But even if we talk of numbers, there is also a point which has been raised by Joel, which I think is key in terms of the niche audience. Because if we talk of numbers, probably the audience in Korogosho, we might not think of, like, for instance, 1 million reach in Korogosho alone for Coach FM, but that particular audience that is there is some interest that areas of their interest that we need to focus on. So I think marketing these community media outlets collectively is a plus, and we've learned that it is now working, and this is working with more so the development partners who are NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and even the government. We've also learned that there is also a need to have some sort of support in terms of financial support. And I agree and really support the idea of us pushing for creation of the fund, Ability Fund, for these media outlets, because they play a very critical role in terms of educating the communities. And even going forward, there will be need. COVID has taught us that there is need to have some behavior change communication models that are championed by these community media outlets. And without those funds, then it might be difficult. But we are also looking at a model whereby we can have people within these communities volunteering themselves. I know Mercy talked of community journalists or community media practitioners being volunteers, but we are looking for a model whereby we can have experts, for instance, working with the county government to have people who are expert, let's say, like for instance, in the areas that the radio stations are addressing matters of the pastoralist. So we have, for instance, people from the Ministry of Agriculture volunteering their time, maybe 1 hour or so a week, to come there to speak about matters of livestock within these radio stations, education experts, so that these are people within these communities who are volunteering themselves, but then they are working somewhere else, so that the burden of probably sustaining them in terms of salaries is taken away from, it's not on the stations. So these models have worked in some areas. I know we shared with some people in India, and they said that is a good model that is working for them. They're having people coming in turns, volunteering hours, and then leaving, not necessarily stations in the stations permanently, as they are there all the time. And that is an area that we need also to explore here in Kenya. But again, coming in terms of the question of independence as of the media has been alluded to by Janak, this fund, there is a need also to have people from the sector, that is media, within the management of this fund. Otherwise, then it might be used as what Guy is doing now, where they can say, no, we are not giving this money to so and so because of this and this. And therefore, the other aspect, which I think is key here in terms of moving forward and in terms of how we can be able to fund the community radio stations, I think there is a need for us also to push for. I know there is the media policy that is being worked on by the Media Council, and I think there is a need for us to have some provision that will mandate the CA to set aside some funds to support these community radio stations. And I'm saying the CA because it's the CA who will, upon having a clear definition of what a community radio station would be, and even going through the validation or registration process, they're the one who will have a record of who or where is the community radio station, or who is a community radio station, or and then they'll be able to know who to fund and what time, and probably then this money, you can say this is the much that they can be given within a year, like it is happening in the UK, where community radios are being funded by the government within UK. So if that happens here, then the question of these community radio stations trying to struggle with the mainstream radio stations, which are indeed in business of making money, then I think that will ease that burden of them struggling, because when they go to the those who are the media buying agency, the first question they are being asked, what is your reach? Where do you cover? Who do you reach? And therefore, that is why this money ends up in the mainstream media only. So going forward, I think I'm looking forward to continue engaging with the colleagues on this, and so that we could find a way that will be of help to the media community sector in Kenya. And I really appreciate being in this conference. Thank you, Rosalia.
Thank you so much, Tom.
All right, Rosalia, may I take over? And thanks to everyone who's presented. And I think we've all been listening to the conversations, the presentations, and the issues that have been raised by various speakers. Of course, everything related to media sustainability, how to ensure that the current challenges are sometimes turned into opportunities. We know that sometimes when we're doing a SWOT analysis, we know that the threats can also be turned into opportunities. We've seen companies like Amazon, Netflix, and others utilizing technologies to become very successful, despite obviously the challenges that have been brought about by COVID, and of course attendant economic challenges, challenges with within the media landscape around the world. The meeting was supposed to end at 12. It's now 28 minutes after 12. We hope that we can take another maybe 20 or so minutes to maybe discuss and give an opportunity to stakeholders that are present here to engage with one another, to engage with issues that have been raised by other colleagues within the media sector. Because I remember, for instance, Janak and Eric raising issues of remuneration, issues of the safety and security of correspondence, people that may not be be employed, and consequently under the umbrella of the various protections that are provided by established media houses. So, you know, and of course, issues of professionalism, issues of corruption, sometimes within the media, issues of press freedom, and issues of support that may be offered various media houses, but also the journalists that work in this very important sector. And of course, there are questions about whether the government is ready to provide support to media. Waruru Wachira talked about the government providing the tourism sector with some sort of support. So should the same, for example, be extended to the media sector? Because we often acknowledge the important role the media plays in society, and it is at the forefront of fighting COVID-19, and of course providing the kind of information and platform through which we are, as a society, willing and sometimes capable of holding the leadership and governors and government to account. So I suppose there's so many issues that have been raised that will be part of that strategic and think paper that we will develop in due course, and that will be shared with the stakeholders here. But I think if we take a few moments, maybe 20 or so minutes to engage with those issues, we may understand each other better and hopefully help frame that paper properly. Yes, so now the floor is open. Anybody want to go first? I think there's a facility for raising your hand, or if you unmute yourself, I'll see you and I'll give you an opportunity to speak. Does anybody have a question or issue that they want to raise? And for journalists that are available on this platform and their microphones are not unmuted, you may, for example, utilize the chat facility to type your question and I'll ask it on your behalf. And this is not done to muzzle you, but to ensure that there is order within this platform. Anybody with a question, comment, concern? And I'm hoping that everybody can hear me.
Yes, we can hear.
Okay. Very good. Anybody then with a question, issue, concern? Or shall we adjourn this meeting to the and say we meet at the next Now Media convention? As I started by saying, there will be a bigger media convention, which will have more participants, but this was meant to be a stakeholders a convention that will help us develop that strategic and or strategy and think paper that we want to develop as a media sector. Any questions? Any questions from the journalists present here? All right, shall we close the meeting then? Because I can't see anybody with a question.
The question from Winnie Kamau.
All right, please read it for us. I can't see any questions. Let me see. Can you see the question from Winnie, Rosalia? Can you ask it for us?
Okay, let's say. Okay, more of a comment. A joint venture for advertising between MOA and digital broadcasters for advertising should be an innovation to be rolled out. It's a comment.
All right. Thanks, Rosalia, and thanks, Winnie. There are so many other comments. There's a comment from Christoph Malestiski. If I'm hoping that I pronounced the name correctly, I found your deliberations quite insightful. We have the same challenges in Namibia. Thanks, Christoph. Yes, I think that is the only comment that I can see other than the ones people who are posting there to be unmuted. All right, then the colleagues, if there are no questions, I think we bring this meeting to a close. Thank you very much for attending, and we will, when we draw the strategy and think paper, we will share it for input, for feedback, before we share it during the next convention. The date for the next convention will also be announced later because we are still working on modalities. We're still working on the logistics. So you will most likely hear from us again very soon. I'm sure you picked a lot of issues from this convention. Again, I hope that they'll be useful going forward. Wamboi, I cannot see your comment, unfortunately. I don't know why. Can anybody see Wamboi Omonyo's comment? Rosalia, can you see Wamunyo's comments?
No, I cannot.
Okay, and Jeru, can you unmute everybody if possible, so that people can talk if they wanted to? Is everybody unmuted? So, or able to unmute themselves?
Don't everybody speak at the same time.
All right, please don't speak at the same time. And Jerry will get an opportunity to unmute yourself. Please mute when you are, he's unmuted everybody, but please mute and only mute when you want to speak. Okay, Wamunyo, please proceed.
Yeah, thank you. And I just wanted to say,
Wamunyo, just one moment. Jero, you might have to mute everyone then again. Jero, please mute everybody for us. And unmute Wamboi. All right, Wamboi.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say that in listening to all this, the education community is also probably very useful in this discussion. Research and development, I think, is an area that I think can be invested in just thinking about how to improve things, audience research. There's someone who talked about, I think it was Joel, an audience measurement tool. And I think this is an opportunity for the training institutions who do research to work together to develop context-specific tools. So I would suggest that. The other suggestion that I would make is, and maybe I'm reinforcing what's already been said, that the idea of cooperation and collaboration is very good because we seem to have a very fragmented media ecosystem where people just do their own thing and they struggle alone. And yet, if there's an opportunity to share resources, share content, share marketing, I was even thinking about community media where they can even share administration through automation, and the tools that we have, the digital tools, become a way to support certain activities that can be automated, which reduces costs and maybe helps channel financial resources in other directions. So those are just my 2 quick observations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wamboi. Yes, I agree that we in the academy have an important role, of course, to play in not only research, but also maybe engaging in conversations and contributing to professionalism through relevant training, providing relevant training, providing a platform through which researchers and practitioners can engage with one another and can engage with the issues as a way of developing developing solutions to some of the challenges that we face. I can see 2 hands, Macharia, Gaido, and Winnie again. Can we have Macharia speaking first? Jeru, please unmute Macharia. Jeru.
Okay, hello.
Yes.
One of the things I really picked up from this thing is what I might call is the lessons from COVID, is that the workplace, and not just for journalists, will never be the same again. And I think it would be a mistake for us to think that once COVID is over, we will simply go back to the newsrooms and continue as before, which means apart from challenging owners and media investors to think of new business models, it is also us as media practitioners, as journalists, to think of new working models. We are not all going to go back to the newsroom. We, I think, are going to be thinking more of how we can work from home and more of how we can work for ourselves and sell content to the established media houses. And I think we can look very much at a place like the US. If you look at CNN, they have correspondents all over the all over the country, all over the US. But anytime you see the American version of CNN, probably 80% of the news does not come from CNN reporters. It comes from affiliate stations in every town or every county or every city in America who just cover the local news and supply CNN what is local that can be broadcast nationally or even internationally. And I think we are going to have a situation where Citizen TV, Nation TV, KTN, and so on are going to cut back on their employees out there in the field and depend on somebody in Meru or Garissa or Mandera or Nyeri or wherever to supply the local content, which can then be broadcast on the news for national consumption. But then they do have to have a very good working relationship. We do have to know that we need trained people out there able to supply that content professionally. And then, of course, also as media investors or as media owners of media houses, we have to commit to paying competitive rates for external content. The same way we are happy to pay CNN for their feed or to pay Reuters and AP and AFP for their news, we should be able to give competitive rates for local content producers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Macharia. And the only hand we have now is Winnie. Please, if you want to speak, raise up your hand. There's a facility for raising your hand. Winnie, is that a new hand or an old hand? Winnie, please. And Jeru, please unmute Winnie.
Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Please proceed.
Okay, so this is Winnie Kamau from Association of Freelance Journalists, and thanks for this opportunity. It was a really great conversation, and I really liked what all the panelists talked about. And just to emphasize on what my senior has just spoken about, we need, and what even John-Mark talked about, correspondents and freelancers, the content that they're going to give, they need to be paid competitively. And if Senior Waruru is still around, and anyone from MOA, it's sad to hear that in this day and age of 2020, year 2020, that one photo is paid $5, 500 mob for one photo. Yet we are talking, when you're talking about competitive rates, when you're talking about CNN and Reuters, you're willing to buy their photo for $100 or even $200. But if it's a Kenyan giving you, a journalist from Kenya, a correspondent or a freelancer giving you a photo, you're willing to pay them $5. That is ridiculous. So in going forward, we need to up our game. Media owners, all the media stakeholders, we need to really realize that we're not living in the same times that we were living in 2019. Things have changed. And another thing that going forward, post-COVID, and even as we continue recovering and looking for strategies, where, as it was mentioned, technology is going to help us. And I'm talking about how best can we engage with artificial intelligence? How best can we look at algorithms so that they can be able to change how our news is displayed? Because I've had these conversations, and Eric Odwar mentioned it, that people are using the same content. It's not using your same content. And even right now, there's a conversation going on. If you've looked at Opera News, and people are saying, why are you taking our news and reusing it? It's technology that's taking up. And one of the things that we need to realize, technology is going to shift and shake so many media houses. It's either we collaborate or we ship out. So going forward, as I had suggested before, media owners and digital broadcasters, there's something that happened in 2018 and even 2019 in UK. All the publishers came together and they created a common project. It's called Ozone Project. Look it up. Ozone Project is where they brought in all the Guardian, the Mails, the Daily Mail, everyone. They brought them together, and they used that that platform to be able to
say anything else. That's all from me. Thank you very much. Oh, and have a good day and take care of yourselves.
Thank you all for coming.
All right. Thank you. And the host can end the meeting now.